There you go.
All right. Good
Right?
evening.
I like
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not great though. I kind of want to go home at that
Also
point.
saves time for preparation.
There you go. Okay, today we're learning Maseches Bava Basra Daf Kuf Chaf Zayin. We'll be stopping 2 lines from the bottom of Kuf Chaf Zayin Amud Beis. And then tomorrow is Thursday already, right? It's tomorrow Thursday.
Halloween.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been my frame of
We
reference, but
still know Daf Yomi and Halloween.
yeah, 100%. Dafka. And then Amir Tashem tomorrow we'll do a blot and a half, and then Rabbi Handler will take over for Shabbos. Starting at the very top of Kuv Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, we were talking about a person who was a tumtum. Just a refresher, a tumtum is a person who's born where it's unclear what gender they are. Even when you look at the anatomy, it's unclear. Amar Amemar Amar. You mess up the first word. Is that like a sign of something?
The rest will be good.
Oh, thank you. I love your divrei bracha. Wasn't what happened in my head though. Ameimar Omar, Af eno memayit chelek bechora. When there is, and the Rashbam explains this case at some length, and this is a bit of a complicated case, when there are a couple of children, and one of them is a pashut, and one of the pshutim is a tumtum, then here's how the math works. The Rashbam writes that if there were to be 9 manas, so there's $900 to be given out. The first thing that happens is that 1/3 gets given to the Bechor, not 2/3, but 1/3. Because really, the 2/3 that the Bechor gets, one of them is his portion, and the other of them is the Pishnayim piece. So yes, they're 2 equal portions, but when one of the kids is a tumtum, he's not allowed to have access to the full amount. So here's what we do. Very complicated, and we really don't have time other than the basics here. There's $900. The Bechor takes 300. Of the remaining 600, it's divided by the Bechor, the Pashut, and the Pashut who is a Tumtum, which is 200 each. And then, in turn, he ends up getting 200. And the Bechor ends up getting 300 plus 200, which is 500. A little bit of a unique case. And the reason we do this is because we don't want the Tumtum. They do. They get the same. Because the nakuda here is that the pashut is not allowed to negatively impact the bechora piece, the pishnayim piece, which is 300. So that's why we siphon off the 300 first, and then we siphon off the 300 first, and then which is the bechor piece, and then he can affect the other piece. That's fine. He just can't affect the bechor piece. Shenemar v'yoladu. It should be v'yoladu lo. No. Yeah, v'yoladu lo vanim. Ben b'shas leda. He's not a regular kid. There's something medically wrong with him. Rav Shezvi Amar af eno nimo l'shmona. That on the 8th day, if it were to fall out on Shabbos or Yantiv, those brisim are not allowed to be done if a baby is born as a tumtum. Who knew? Like I'm a mo. Who would have thought? So we find out it's a boy. Okay, so then day 1 was day 1 and day 8 is day 8. Oh my gosh. I called Rabbi Reese 3 times today with this shiloh I was telling you about today. So complicated. So he says, Af eno nimo l'shmona. The Amar Kro, why can't a tumtum have his bris on day 8? Says the Gemara, because the pasuk says, Isha ki sazri abi elada zachar, uvayom hashemini yimol, ad shehe zachar mishas leda. Got to be a zachar from the first minute. If you're not a zachar from the first minute, even if down the road, an hour later, 2 hours later, they do a procedure, they cut things open and they see the taka, it's a boy. So fine, but then you were into Zachar Mishas Leda, so the bris cannot be on Shabbos. This is another preclusion. Usually when I'm on the phone with parents, this is not what we talk about. Usually I tell them, because they'll say, well, this is every secular Jew asks this, what happens if the bris were to fall out on Shabbos? Don't we just push off the bris? Because then their heads, again, I don't know what they're actually thinking, but they're saying it's got to be that it's forbidden for one reason or another. So I say, well, actually, perfect storm. If the baby's born on actual Shabbos, not bein hashmashas, if the baby is born via natural versus C-section, but a C-section baby is not allowed on Shabbos. But there's another preclusion. I should start.
That's what I meant. You have to add it to your list.
You got to add to the list. And if your child is a tumtum, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that.
And it's not a C-section, you do it on the 8th day anyway, you do it on the 8th day from the C-section. right?
Even no, yeah, as long as it's not Shabbos, but it's not considered a Leda, not a regular Leda at least. Yeah, if I
I
the
mean, you
baby.
also put it on top, unless it's shut, it's not though.
Yeah, it's just not Docha Shabbos, exactly. So the scenarios that I tell parents are four in regards to being Docha Shabbos. There's Zman, which is Bein Hashmashos is pushed off to Sunday. There is how the baby was born, which is C-section versus natural. In fact, some poskim go so far as to say that if a birth is even assisted in any way by forceps or by vacuum, that also can't be done on Shabbos. We don't really poskin that way. We basically poskin that as long as it's a regular natural birth, even with assistance, that's fine as long as it's Yotze Derech Osamakum, then that's considered to be a Leda and the bris can be on Shabbos. The third caveat is that the baby cannot be driven to his bris. That's the poskim speak about that. Even if I could walk there, but you drive your baby there, that's not allowed. It's better than that. It's like mitzvah baba avera. Maybe it's not a perfect example, but it at least smells like that. And the last example is if I Pasha can't get there. So this past Sunday, I had 4 brises on Sunday. Why did I have 4 brises on Sunday? Because the week before, Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos, it was a 3-day yontiv. So any baby that was born in the boondocks, I was in Round Lake, I was in Northbrook, I was in downtown, and then I went back up to the northern suburbs, whatever the exact flow, be'erach. So I spoke to some of the post-com here in Chicago about this, how you just flippantly postpone a bris. Yeah, because who's the other option? You've got Reform Rabbi X and Cantor so-and-so, and if they're not using me and they want to hit day 8, then I have to tell them openly, if you want your son to have a kosher bris, we need to postpone. Because I know that no Orthodox moles live out there. So then we postpone. That's logistical topic number 4, which is if I can't get to you, we just postpone the bris. Gotten some pushback from people in the community. They think it's because of money that I say that. I'm like, chas v'shalom, you think I'd postpone a bris?
The option is Rabbi, that's.
I know, yeah. There is a physician who is a female. I think that's her website. It's drmohelet.com. I've never looked it up, but I've heard about it. Had she been, her psul is not that she's female. her psul is that she's not frum. It's a little bit different. Okay. Rav Shravya Amar Af Ein Imo Tmei Leda. Wow, this is already full extension here. That this Leda of a child who is a tumtum doesn't even cause tumas Leda. We know that by a boy that she's tamah shiv asyamim, and if it's for a girl, she's tamah shvu'ayim. So there, she's not. It's not that she's tmeya like nida or something, but she's not tmeya in those particular first set of days. That also might then have an impact on the korbanos that are brought in regards to the Leda. I don't know, because isn't that based on the Tuma, the korbanos? I think they're based on the Tuma. So there's a lot of nafkaminas if a baby is born as a tumtum. The Amar Kra, why is it that we would say that Rav Shravya says that there's no Tumas Leda? Because the Pasuk says 8 lines down, Kuf Chav Zayin Amar Aleph Yishok Ki Sazriya V'Yolada Zachar that's when Tuma kicks in. If not, then not. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Meisve, we have a brisa, first long line. Hamapelas, God forbid if a woman miscarries. Tumtum, what we've been discussing, a child whose anatomy is undefined or covered. The androgynous, androgyny, where a child presents with both male and female genitalia. So what does it say over here? It's a tumtum. What does it say? Teshev lezachar ulinakeva. She does have tuma for both a zachar and an akeva, so it's 14 days. Tiyuvta de Rav Shravya, tiyuvta. This brisa seems to go in the face of Rav Shravya. Rav Shravya says that ein imot me'aleda. Yet over here in the brisa, on the first long line, it says teshiv lezachar lenakeva. So Rav Shravya must be wrong. Says the Gemara, lema tehavi tiyuvta de Rav Shesvi. Let's go back up a little bit. If what you're saying is that she still has tuma, then maybe the bris should be on day 8, even on Shabbos. Mehecha teisi that you should postpone the bris. If we're concerned about tumas leda on day, even though the leda was not normal, because the leda was normal, but the baby was not normal, perhaps we should say that the bris taka should also be on time. So says the Gemara, really the Tana of this brisa is svuke misafkale ulechumra. He holds in all cases lechumra. He holds by bris milah lechumra. What's the chumra by bris milah? Is that it's better to do the bris not on Shabbos to avoid chilul Shabbos, because the only override to do a circumcision on Shabbos where removing skin is otherwise a chilul Shabbos. is when it's Shabbos Vadai, when the Leda is Vadai Yom Hashmini. It's Yom Hashmini Vadai, below Yom Hashmini suffix. So if a baby is born Bein Hashmashos on Friday afternoon, we don't do the bris on Shabbos because it's suffix Shmini, suffix Chi. So we push off the bris because you can't do a bris late, can't do a bris early. Not on Shabbos, they can only be done on time. We paskin the sway ladina that a bris on Shabbos can only be done bismano, but a bris shelo bismano is not done on Shabbos. So he's lechumra over there. He's also lechumra by Teshev Lazachar Lenakeva, where he disagrees with Rav Shravya, is that Rav Shravya is confident. He says this baby's not normal. This Tana was Sfukim Esafkale. So he says we have a suffix doraisa by the dam of the first week of the boy. And also it could have been a girl, we didn't know. So at the moment of Leda, which level of Tuma governed? It was both. It was boy and girl. Therefore, she's Tumah for 14 days. Hachi says the Gemara, Teshe Lazachal and Keva Ulanida. Then there should be something else that's at play here, which is that there should be no Dam Tohar. We know that Dam Tohar is the days after the Tumas Leda, up till for boys for 40 days and for girls for 80 days. Those days are called Dam Tohar. That Dam is not Matame Midoraisa. We're very makbid on it. We are very makbid on it as Jews, but today, present day. But if the Tana of the Brisa on the first wide line is concerned, it's Sfukim Esafkale, then why do we have Dam Tohar? We should also be concerned that Dam is Dam Leda, is Dam Nida, excuse me. This ties into a massive machlokas rishonim elsewhere in Shas, as to the cycle, as to when we assume there is blood that is nida, as opposed to dam ziva. This is a big machlokas between Rashi and the Rambam. Some Rishonim hold that a woman has a cycle of 11-7, 11-7 from the day she gets her first period. First 11 days, all the blood that's viewed in those 11 days is dam nida. The next 7 days is dam ziva. And for the remainder of her life, until she has a baby, and then it starts again with her next period, 11-7, 11-7, 11-7. So all of this would tie in, because now, throughout the Dam Tohar, there's going to be some of those days where the blood is eligible to become Nida. And if all you're doing, Tana of the Brisa, is being Machmir, so then we should be concerned about Nida Mibayle, says the Gemara. Kasha, that's a very good point. How then do we understand the author of this Brisa, who wants to be L'chumra, but who's totally omits a pasuk in Vayikra, V'isha el Nidas Tumasalo Sikrav? So it's not so pashim. And the Gemara leaves it like that. Nevertheless, we do see a couple of dinim. We've seen a handful of them, where the fact that a child is born as a tumtum generates nafkaminas la'alacha. We've seen that it affects pishnayim as a bechor. We've seen that it affects ben soreru more. We've seen that it affects the chelek of the bechora if he's a pasha. We've seen that it affects yom hashmini for bris milah. We've seen that it also affects tumas leda. And potentially, there's a machlokas about that from the Tanakama, because he's Sukim Safkim. That brings us halfway down, 3 lines into the wide lines on Kuf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Omar Rava Tanya Kavase de Rav Ami. Rav Ami was the Shita 4 lines from the bottom on yesterday's Gemara, Kuf Chav Vav Amud Beis. There he told us that Tumtum Shenikra V'nim Sezachar Einu Notel Pishnayim. That he said that a bechor doesn't get pishnaim if the bechor is a tumtum. So child number 1 is born, it's a boy, and the nurses are checking out the baby right after the birth, and they're like, we don't recognize this. This is not standard genitalia. It's not both, but it's neither. It's, again, skin covering the area. You can urinate. There's a perforation for him to urinate. There's a urethra, whatever the details are. I actually had a case that kind of sort of looked like this. I scrubbed in at Lurie's. This is not my wheelhouse. That's like a full repair. It's a 5-hour surgery under general anesthetics. But when you looked at that baby, he did not look normal at all. Not even close. And we would have called him a boy just from what we saw, but it wasn't a normal anatomy by any stretch of the imagination. So in an even more severe case, where you can't tell, so maybe Ravami's right. And what's the brisa that supports Ravami? Says Rava. The brisa says Ben. And what is the pasuk of Ben? This is Kisyen al ishte nashim ha'achas ahuva v'ha'achas sinua v'yaladulo vanim ha'avuva v'asnu v'haya la ben ha'bechor la asniya. So the word ben, v'lo tumtum. We need a vados. We need it to be that when a child is born, it is definitely a boy. And if it is not definitely a boy, it's a tumtum, then he's not a bechor. And what does the word bechor mean? V'lo safek. So ask the Gemara. Vishlama ben v'lo tumtum. I understand what Ravami meant, Kid Ravami, that when it says ben, it teaches me not a tumtum. El bechor v'lo safek la'afu kemai. What was the Brisa trying to teach me when it quotes the pasuk of Bechor and says, Bechor velo safek? So says the Gemara, La'afuke mi de darash Rava, from something that Rava taught. The darash Rava, shtei nashim sheyaldu beis zecharim b'machva. There were two women who were impregnated by the same man. So a man has two wives. They gave birth in different hospitals on the same day at approximately the same time. But because it was b'machava, they were hidden from one another. We don't know who the Bechor is. We have a pure unknown. And now we actually have on the birth certificates time of birth is X. I am certain that back in the day, they did no such thing. They didn't have watches. They didn't have clocks. Even if they wrote down the time, they would say the sun is over tree number 4. No way were they as detailed as we are. So the Gemara says, what would happen if this man had two wives and the two wives gave birth on the same day? We didn't know who the Bechor was. So the Gemara says, Kosvin harsha zelazeh. Each one says to the other one, you're allowed to take pishnayim. So it's not really that there's a Bechor, it's just a workaround that if one kid goes over to the other one and says, I'm a Bechor, they'll say, yeah, maybe it's the other brother. You guys were born on the same day. He said, yeah, that brother allows me to take. Amalei Rav Papa the Rava, hold on 1 second. How can you say that they're kosvin harsha lezelazeh? That one Safek Bechor can give the other Safek Bechor permission to take pishnayim? After all, that's not what we learned. V'ashalach Rabin said, Davar zeh sha'alti l'chol rabosai v'lo amru davar. Nobody knew what to do in a case where a man has two wives who gave birth the same day. Biram, however, kach amru mishum Rav Yanai. My Rabbeim didn't know, but Rav Yanai knew. What did Rav Yanai say? Hukru ulevisofnis arvu. If when the two boys were born, we knew which one was the Bechor, but only now nis arvu, then we say kosvin harsha zelazeh. However, lo hukru, if we never knew, we never had our bearings in regards to which kid is which, ein kosvin harsha zelazeh. Then we don't do it, Rava said, kasha and Rava. Now, where does this come up, halacha l'maisa? Identical twins. Baby number 1 is born. Baby number 2 comes out exactly the same. They're weighing the two kids on scales next to each other. The nurses get confused. So then, there's no Bechor anymore. They messed it up. And that's the maisa. It's halacha l'maisa. In that case, says Rav Yanai, we're kosvin harsha zelazeh. Whoever then, each of them say to the other, if you get it, then you get it. If I get it, then I get it. But Ladina, there's actually no Bechor at all, because a Bechor is a Vadai. Bechor is not a Safek. That's what he meant when the Pasuk said Bechor below Safek. This is a case of Safek. He's not really a Bechor. Now, this is the Kasha and Rava, because Rava said that we're Kosvin Harsha, even if we never knew who the Bechor was. And that's not what Rav Yanai said. Rav Yanai said we only write a Harsha when we already knew but got confused about who the Bechor was. So listen to the humility. Hadar uki Rava amora ale. Rava got back the megaphone speaker, the person who actually said what Rava wanted to say loudly. The guy had some good lungs. The Darash. This is what Rava said out loud. This is also a Gemara Maseches Shabbos. Dvarim shamarti lachem tos hein biyadi. What I just taught you was completely incorrect. Biram kach amru mishum Rav Yanai. Here is what I will tell you, is that even though I didn't have clarity from my Rabbanim, we do have some clarity from Rav Yanai. Hukru sofnis arbu. That's when we're kosvin harsha zelazeh. When we used to know who the Bechor was, but we got confused, then we write a harsha. Then each of the Safek Bechorim give each other rishus to take. However, lo hukru ein kosvin harsha zelazeh. Complete humility. I made a mistake. Here we go. I'm sorry. It was my bad. Which is amazing, because it's a little surprising to me that Rava didn't have this information. Okay? Rava wasn't a rookie Amora. He was older. He was 200 years, maybe a little bit less, 150 years into the period of Amoraim. That's not a small amount of time. And by that point, we already had all of the Toseftas. They were all put together by Levi and Bar Kapara, who were one generation out from Rebbe. I understand the Brises were never codified like the Mishnayos, but it happens. We do see it in Shas, but it just strikes me a little. It's difficult to believe that he didn't have it, but other people did. Okay, Kachazeh. Next, Shalchu le b'nei Akra de Agma l'Shmuel. The people from Akra de Agma said to Shmuel, Yalamdenu Rabbeinu, teach me some Torah. Hayamuchzakim bezeh shehu bechor. Word on the street was that Chaim was the bechor in a family. So we have a chazaka. That's the language of muchzakim. Chazaka that Chaim is the bechor. The Amar Aviv al Acher bechorhu mahu. So now you have the claim of the father against the chazaka. The chazaka is that Chaim is the bechor. The father says, no, he's not. Ruvain is the bechor. Who wins? Do we trust the father or do we trust the chazaka? So Shalach lehu kosvin harsha zelazeh. Shmuel, in effect, skirts answering the question. He basically is saying, I don't know, because what he's saying is just write a harsha, right? That's not answering a question. It's deflecting the question and pivoting to a compromised response. Kosvin harsha zelazeh. Top of Kufchav Zayin, a base heading to the bottom of the page. Asks the Gemara, I don't understand Shmuel. Manavshach. One way or the other, Shmuel should be able to paskin. Ikirabanon svirale, then lishlach lehu kirabanon. Ikir Yehuda svirale, lishlach lehu kirav Yehuda. If he holds like the Rabbanon, paskin that way. If you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, paskin that way. Who are these shitas of the Rabbanon and Rabbi Yehuda? Let's see. The Gemara is going to quote a brisa in a second. But before we even see the brisa, the Gemara is going to tell us that Shmuel, who when he heard this question, chazaka of the community versus the shtempel, the statement of the father about a child, that he's mesupak. The Gemara says, Mesaf Galei, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbanan. And Mahi. What's the brisa with these two opposing shitas of the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda? The Gemara says, De Tanya. 4 lines down on Kuf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. The pasuk says, Yakir. And the length of the pasuk, it says, Ki es habechor ben hasnuah yakir. He should recognize. And we darshan yakirenu le'acherim. The father can make it recognized to others, namely that the father has an override. So that means that the Tanakama holds that the father is stronger than a chazaka. Mikan, says the Gemara, Mikan Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Naaman Adam Lomar Zebeni Bechor. This is my child, he's a Bechor. I don't care what your opinion is. Nobody asked you, and it's not a democracy. This is my child. I'm telling you, he's my Bechor. Today, we really wouldn't, unless we had a real reason to, we would have said, oh, you guys are just wrong, and the father wins. But by the Gemara, Shmuel was really mesupak. Could you imagine a scenario where a father walks into the room and they say, I'm sorry that you all thought that Chaim was the Bechor. You're wrong. It's Ruvain. Shmuel says, Safek Bechor. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Socially hard to comprehend. And just like a person is trusted to say, a father is trusted to say that this is my son and he's the Bechor against the Chazaka. So too, the father can say, look, I messed up. I married a ben Gerusha. I married a ben Chalutza. And in effect, what is he saying about the child? That he's a Chalal. It's a very powerful testimony. The father is trusted to say that. What we're seeing over here, in short, is that a father is simply trusted. Right? He's trusted to say Lativusa that he's a Bechor. He gets Pishnai. He's trusted to say that he's a ben Gerusha ben Chalutza, and now he's a Chalal, just based on this one person. Makes sense. That father is the father. He's the father of the child. He knows. The Chachamim Omrim Eino Ne'eman. The father is not believed. Okay, now let's get into these two shitas. By the way, just before we move on, this is why Shmuel was conflicted, because he didn't know who we paskin like in this brisa. That's why the Gemara says 3 lines down on the top, from the top. It says Masaf Galek Rabbi Yehuda Ikar Abanon. It was a suffix if he held like Rabbi Yehuda that we trust the father even to make a child a chalal, or no, we follow the Chachamim that the father is not neman against the chazaka. Then Omar Le Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak the Rava Bishlam the Rabbi Yehuda. I understand why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, why he holds that there is ne'emanus for the father. Hainu dechsiv yakir. That's why the father is believed, because there's a pasuk in Chumash. It's gzeras hakasu. So now we have a pasuk against the chazaka. No problem. We trust the father. That makes sense. However, Elo le Rabbanan yakir lamali. What did the Rabbanan do with the shita? What do they do? After all, yakir, according to according to Rabbi Yehuda, teaches me that we trust the father, which is the exact opposite of what the Rabbanan hold. Zog the Gemara, betzarech hakera. No, that's not what we're talking about. When is it that we say yakir? That's not against another chazaka. That's just when we need to be makir. Oh, this is my family. By the way, this is B'ni Bechori. I've done that before. where I walk into a room where nobody knows me. These are my twins. Asher's the Bechor. No problem. That's what the Chachamim say Yakir means. So here's the machlokas. When the pasuk says Yakir, that a father is allowed to identify their child as a Bechor. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that he's trusted even against the Chazakah. But the Chachamim hold that Yakir does not teach me that. Yakir only teaches me that a father can identify that his child is a Bechor, but not against the Chazakah. So the machlokas is, which is more powerful, the opinion of the Chazakah or the opinion of the father? And that, says the Gemara, is we struggle to understand how to learn the word Yakir. So says the Gemara. The Ma'ihil Chasa, what are the applications of this identifying of the child? If you want to say Lemeis Velo Pishnayim, if you want to say that this discussion of Shmuel is to identify which child is the Bechor, who cares? Lo Yehei Ela Acher, he's no different than anybody else trying to identify the child, and where there's an element of Safek, and there is no real Bechor. You want to give a matana, you want to give one of the kids Pishnayim, you're allowed to do that. That's fine. Pishnayim is no longer applicable. Just give out gifts to your kids as long as you want. As long as there's a minimum common amount that everybody gets, no problem. Says the Gemara, no, lo tzricha, what case are we talking about? You're right. In the initial disbursement of the Yerusha, you're right, he could just give it out as a matana. But if there were to be other monies that were to come in, who would get them in a Pishnayim format? That we don't know. That is what Shmuel was really struggling with, and why he wasn't a supak as to whether or not we hold like Rabbi Yehuda or the Rabbanan. Then the Gemara throws a wrench in. The Rav Meir de Amar Adam Makna Davar Shelo Balaolam Yakir Lamali. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. You want to tell me that we are concerned about Nechasim Shenaflu Lo La'achar Zman? That's only according to some shitas. But the Rav Meir, who says that a person can be Makna Davar Shelo Balaolam, then what did the Rabbanan use the word Yakir for? It's no longer necessary because you can be makna davar shelo bala olam, which means just give out gifts, no problem at all. Says the Gemara, b'nechasim shenafu lo kshehu goses. The Gemara creates a new kimta that really what we're talking about is a case scenario where the person who is dying is a goses. He's in terrible shape. He's actually in no position to say anything whatsoever, and therefore we struggle to trust what he says. The Gemara therefore says that's what the word Yakir teaches, is that we trust the father even on his deathbed to say that this is my child. Of course, things are very complicated. Lamaisa, a person that has dementia, they don't always know their children. Rahman al-Islam, but there are cases like that where the dementia is so severe, they don't know who's who, they don't know what's up or down, they have no idea. So their neshama is being cleansed, no doubt. It's Yisur and Mamish. But that doesn't mean they're trustworthy. So again, there would be limits to what type of goses we are, but that's not for today's discussion. Let's continue the Chazakah conversation. We're halfway down on Kuf Chav Zayin Amud Beis, Tanu Rabbana. The rabbis have taught us in a brisa. If there's a boy and we have a Chazakah about him that he's a Bechor, the Amar Aviv al Acher Shehu Bechor Ne'eman. The father pushes against the Chazakah. He's Ne'eman. Whose shita is this? This is Rabbi Yehuda. Let's say it was the reverse. There's a chazaka that a person isn't a bechor. Amar Aviv, no, you're wrong. Bechor who? Eino neman. Now this is a problem because the Reisha and the Seifa are saying exact opposite things. In the Reisha, we said that a father is stronger than a chazaka. In the Seifa, we said that the father is not stronger than a chazaka. So how do we answer this up? Says the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down. Reisha, Rabbi Yehuda, v'Sefer Rabbanan. What else are we supposed to do? It's a shver Mishnah. It's a shver brisa. So we're going to answer it a little balabatish and say that there's multiple authors to this brisa. When we say that the father is ne'eman more than the chazaka, that's how Rabbi Yehuda learned the pasuk of Yakir. So Pashat, that's Rabbi Yehuda. When the brisa says that a father is not ne'eman, that's obviously Rabbi Yehuda, because that's obviously the Chachamim who learned the word Yakir, that we only trust the father when there's no chazaka that he's going up against. But when there is a chazaka, we don't trust the father. Couple of quick Gemaras. This does require unpacking, and we just, again, I wish we could. It would be very enjoyable. We just don't have time. Each one of these lines is packed with information. Amar of Yochanan, Amar, if a man says Benihu, V'chazar ve'amar avdihu eino ne'eman. If a man says, "This is my son," and then he corrects himself to say, "Actually, this is my eved," he's not trusted. Why is he not trusted? He's not trusted because no one would ever call their eved their son. So he's not trusted. He has no ne'emanos. Avdihu, what if he said this person is my eved, and then he changed v'chazar v'amar benihu? First he said he was an eved, the opposite of the first case. So then he called him his ben. That's ne'eman, because there are times that fathers have children who serve them like avodim. I don't have children like that, but the Gemara says the mishamesh li ka'avda ka'amar. When I said that this person is an eved, what I meant to say is my son serves me properly. He serves me like an eved. Eved mishamesh es rabo. That's what children are supposed to do. They're supposed to tend to the needs of their parents. Again, ayin sham b'kedushin, what's covered, what's mora, all the halachos, all the various shilas that come up. And, there's a reversal when people get older that children are now taking care of their parents instead of parents taking care of their children. And that those are huge mitzvos d'oraisa. V'chilufa abeis hameches. But these halachos revert if what you are doing is making a comment that relates to the taxes that you need to pay. Let's see what this means. Haya over al beis hameches v'amar benihu v'chazar v'amar avdihu ne'eman. There we believe him to say that he's an eved. Amar avdihu v'chazar v'amar benihu. If a person were to start out by saying that the person's an eved, and then he goes back and says benihu eino ne'eman. In short, whatever he says that's cheaper is believable because he's trying to minimize his tax burden. Now, this must be talking about a case where it's an akum who's collecting money, because if there were to be a tax from, this is a big discussion in the Gemara and in the Rishonim in particular, about a government that is not a firm government. This is a big machlokas, and of course there's the famous shita of the Ran, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Malka Da'ara. There's no chiyuv to pay taxes in Eretz Yisrael. I've spoken to my Rabbeim over the years about that, and they do not feel that way. When I worked in Eretz Yisrael, I had to pay taxes. And here in America, it's Dina de Malchus Adina. It's only in Eretz Yisrael where there's that svara that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Malka Da'ara. But here in America, one is obligated to pay taxes. One of the famous exclusions, it might even be infamous actually, in regards to paying taxes, is that there's a sugya that we've learned before in the past called Hafkas Alva. And when it comes to Hafkas Alva with an akum, so there are kulas. So the way that things work is that the government does the work for us, and then we pay in arrears. We pay taxes at the end, by April 15th on 2025, we're paying for the monies that were spent in 2024, which means it's Hafkas Alva. We're paying back a loan to a goy. So that's why some poskim are makel under certain circumstances to not pay for every dollar. It's not so pashut, and you should ask your local Orthodox rabbi. And if you are in a high audit category, you should really be careful because it's a massive chilul Hashem, which is asur too. But in a vacuum, Hafkas Alva by an akum is not asur. A few lines from the bottom, we're going to ask a kasha on Rav Nachman, and then we're going to call it a day. Meisvei. There was someone who was serving their master like a son. This is going to be against Rav Yochanan. And this is not like the din that we saw above in the name of Rav Yochanan, where we had said that if a person says Eved first followed by Ben, that he was Naaman. That's if you called the Eved an Avda Meitzar Mea. What is this phrase of Avda Meitzar Mea? So the Gemara says, my Meitzar Mea, Meitzar Avda Kuvzuze, that he has a value. Meitzar technically means a border or a boundary. But here in the context, what it's talking about is he has a value of X. No one talks about their children like that. I mean, by Erchen, we have such an idea. But when we're saying this person is my Eved Meitzar Mea, this is my Eved who's worth X, they were Pashut property. They were sellable as property. So because that's true, then Pashut in that case, Rav Yochanan's not going to say that if you switch from Eved to Ben, he would say Naaman, because he wasn't talking about that. But over here in this Brisa, the Meisvei, 5 lines from the bottom, when it said Einu Naaman, that was talking about a case where the person described the Eved as Meitzar Mea, And Meitzar Abda Kuv Zuzeh is worth 100, which clearly is not talking about a son. Therefore, Eino Neman, you can't switch over to saying you're like a son. We'll stop right here at the bottom of Kuv Chav Zayin Amud Beis, and Emir Tashem will pick up tomorrow with Kuv Chav Ches. Wishing you all a beautiful night.